Hey, what's up, guys? So it's been a while since I went out and played Magic, so I went out today, being the 22nd, I think, and played some Modern today. So not much has changed about my deck, but I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick deck profile update on my deck, and yeah, talk about the results I had today, and hopefully it's a an enjoyable video. If not, just let me know. Anyways, so yeah, so let's jump into the deck. Like I said, not too much has changed. I've liked the ratios of most of the cards I've been playing, and they mostly worked pretty well against fares pretty well against most matchups. Whether it's other control decks or other aggro meta decks, or even combo decks, stuff like that. I think the ratio has been working pretty well. Lands have been pretty decent. I mean, there's always the case where you'll draw no lands or draw no colors that you need, but that's just the nature of playing a three-color deck. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. So I'll try to quickly go through my deck, and then I'll talk about some of the cards I made some changes to. So I still got two Fatal Pushes. I still really like this card. Really efficient removal. Um, Great against most aggro matchups. Great against Ragavan because as much as I like Prismatic Ending does not answer a Dashing Ragavan, and you don't always have the opportunity to play Teferi plus the uptick the Teferi to Prismatic Ending the Ragavan. So Fatal Push is there to kind of answer that, and on top of that, it does hit some other big annoying creatures, maybe like a Dryad or something that's 4 mana or whatever. You can always crack a land, trigger the revolt, and answer the creature. And also, it's pretty good against tokens and stuff like that. So it's got its uses. I wouldn't play more than three, maybe. I would not play four anymore. Not with Prismatic, but I think two in the deck gives you some answers to certain things that are a little tricky to answer with just the regular, Prismatic Ending and stuff like that. Which is why I still like playing black in the deck, even though, I think blue white is probably easier to pilot, probably more consistent. Just the nature of being, two colors. I'm still playing the four opt here, so it's four opt. I still like it. It's good for the Snapcaster I talked about before. Not much else to say about the card. You can choose to play Consider or any other cantrip. I would always advise to play a cantrip that's an instant. Don't play cantrips that are sorcery. Then, because if you play a sorcery cantrip, that means you're tapping out your mana to draw a card, which is most of the time not that good. You want to keep your mana open, especially in the control deck. Keep your mana open, and then if your opponent doesn't do anything, then yes, you feel free to cast your cantrip during their turn. But yeah, you don't want to be casting cantrips during your turn unless you really need it. Unless you really you're stuck on a land or something, then go ahead and cast on your turn. But otherwise, I'd always keep my mana open. That's why instant speed cantrips are the best here. Plus, it works with Snapcaster. You can flash in um, the the op during your opponent's turn with Snapcaster. Otherwise, if it's a sorcery speed, you're not gonna be able to do anything with it. Um, yep, I'm still playing forward Prismatic Ending. Still a pretty good removal card. I'm debating on playing since Kamigawa came out about a week ago. I've been debating on playing the otherworldly March of the Otherworldly Light, I think, which is like an interesting card. It does what Teferi does. It like basically it hits what Teferi can hit, like creatures, artifacts, um, enchantments, and it doesn't specify non-land, so you can hit like a Urza Saga and stuff like that, which in theory sounds pretty good. Um, but I found that like the extra mana cost, I don't know if it's. I mean, you can always pay for it, which is nice. Prismatic Ending, the highest CMC you can hit for is like 5, where like the Outer Worldly Light, it basically is as much mana as you can afford to dump into it. So that's the one thing about it, and then I guess you can also like pitch your white cards to decrease the cost of the Otherworldly Light, which is nice. But and it's also an instant, which is nice. So maybe you could try it out. Maybe if you're doing like just a blue-white deck, instead of playing the Fatal Pushes, you can play the Otherworldly March and try it out. I mean, it is kind of expensive. I mean, Prismatic's still pretty expensive to play in certain matchups, but I think it's pretty good there. The one thing Prismatic endings got over it is it can hit, I guess, Planeswalkers, which this deck in general has a hard time dealing with Planeswalkers. So I think, like, dealing with a Teferi or a Ren and 6, like something like that, very important in this particular deck. If they resolve, you need to be able to answer that, and I think that's why Prismatic ending is still good, versus the Otherworldly doesn't answer, a Teferi or um, a Ren and 6. If they did, if it could hit in a Planeswalker, I would definitely at least play 1 or 2 copies of it in the deck. Maybe instead of playing 3 prismatic or 4 prismatic, you can go to 3 prismatic and like 1 or 2 otherworldly. I might side it. I'll see about it, but yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit later. Still too damn. I still like it, and I play against a bunch of Infinity decks lately, or at least 1 or 2. Or I actually played Infinity against Infinity today, and the dam worked pretty nicely. They couldn't regenerate their artifacts and just board wipe, and yeah. And then when I needed to, I just cast it for 2 black and just hit something, and then still have mana open up for a counter spell next turn on my opponent's turn. So I still like the 2 dam. Yep, 4 counter spells. Not much to say about the card. That I haven't already mentioned, or you haven't already seen one on someone else's deck profile. Yep, still 4 Snapcasters. I still really like the card. It's great against. I think this is the card that usually wins me against other control matchups. Other control matchups, they don't really play, extra value cards like Snapcasters. They'll play like Solitudes, stuff like that. Which this card technically kind of beats the Solitude, because it's cheaper to play and it gets you extra value, and it's still a 2/1 body. Yeah, I still like Snap over, you know, in this in control decks, I guess. Provide good value still. Still 2 Kyle in the side, or in the main, I guess. Still like it. It's provided me some answers and stuff like that, especially against in game 1 burn decks. I love having this against burn decks. Solves a bunch of problems. It doesn't really officially deal with Eidolon, but it still deals with a lot of other stuff that you can't normally deal with. Yep, 4 Teferi still. Maybe I should buy another hollow copy and just have them all matched, but whatever, since that's not a big deal. Yeah, great card, especially in the side match. I still like just having him because it turns off a lot of interaction, which then you can save your counter spells instead of if you have him on the board, you can save your counter spells to counter threats rather than trying to counter other counter spells, I guess. So that's why I still like him at 4. Yeah, there are matches where he's kind of bad, but in if anything, he's still like uh, really slow draw engine, which is kind of nice. You can still uptick him and downtick him when you need to draw. It makes your prismatic ending and your dam instant speed, which is nice. But yeah, it's still a pretty good card. I don't think I'll ever get banned in Modern, because Modern is a pretty fast format nowadays with a lot of answers and threats. Small threats like Ragavan and stuff like that, which Teferi doesn't really necessarily answer, but that's a topic for another time. Yep, still 4 Archmage Charm. Still really like this card. It's definitely a little bit harder to cast in this deck than it is in like a blue-white control deck, but I still believe 4 is the way to go, just so you can open up and see it when you need to. Use it as a counter, use it as a draw. I like this over playing Memory Deluge. I'll talk about that in a second here, and yeah. So I'm playing 1 Cryptic. I still like the Cryptic occasionally, seeing it. It's not a bad card, and sometimes it saves your butt. That, and you can kind of recycle it with the Snapcaster. So yeah, I still like the 1 Cryptic. I was trying out 2, but I ended up just disliking it and putting it back to 1. So I used to play Memory Deluge, but I took it out just because there were certain matchups where it was just too expensive to cast, that I found. Like I just didn't have the opportunity to cast it, or it was just too slow, and it's definitely still a good card. Like if you can, in like a blue-white control deck, I think you can afford to play it more. But I think in my deck where I'm like playing 3 colors, I just don't necessarily have the time or the mana to dump into it, because I'm trying to do other stuff, I guess. So I don't know. I found myself not being able to use it super duper well in certain matchups, so I just end up taking it out. Jace here. I still like Jace. Actually came into play today as a win con. Um, just because. But yeah, I still like the Jace. Just at one. Um, More than one, you could play maybe two and make it work. But I think one's okay because he is prone to bolt and he's prone to like Ragavan and other hasters. So just be a little bit careful when you do get a chance to cast him. Um, I guess the newest addition here is I added a second Solitude to the deck. Um, and yeah, I kind of liked that too. Because I'm playing Snapcasters and stuff like that, I don't think you need and on top of I have Kyle's Guild and Fatal Pushes. I don't think you need more than two in an Esper deck. In the blue white control deck, definitely you should be playing four, I think. But in my particular build, since I have some other cheap, efficient removal, he's not super duper necessary. He's here to kind of gain me some health and to basically act as a threat sometimes. Although his body's pretty weak, it's a 3/2, so he does get blocked by a bunch of stuff, and he does die to bolt, does die to unholy heat, stuff like that. He's Solitudes just don't stick on the board. I mean, they stick less than a Snapcaster. Like I had Snapcasters stick on the board for a long time, but Solitudes they don't stick that long. But if you do get them to stick, they can be a win con on their own. Oftentimes, I almost never invoke this guy. I only invoked him when I really needed to, but otherwise I just hard cast the Solitudes as kind of a win con there. Alright, I think that. Oh, I guess two Teferis too. Yeah, I still like the two. Sometimes I open up with two of them, and that kind of sucks. But for the most part, once you resolve one, you're basically should be able to win from there. And then if you resolve one, you should be able to ult with it, and then resolve the second one, and then proceed to win with the Teferi ult from there. So yeah, just two. You could play three if you want to, but I opted just to play two. Just because the format's kind of fast, and I don't think you're always gonna have the opportunity to resolve the Teferi. In terms of land, not much has changed. It's the exact same as last time. I got these Hall of Storm Giants here, Celestial, one Gate, one Ruins, one Catacomb, one Fortress. This is all kind of, I guess, up to you how you want to build out the deck and the mana base. It's just what I had on hand and just what I like to play, so that's why I'm playing those. I definitely still like one of each of these. They do come in handy, and there are situations where you'd rather have one versus the other one, but I like having both, and they kind of are a win con on their own too. So, yep, 4 polluted, 4 flooded, standard stuff here. Not much to say about that. And then basically you got your five basics, okay, so you can at least be able to combat Blood Moon a little bit. And I'll talk about that a little bit later because these helped me win a game today. And then just 2/2. I like having 2/2 just because they're searchable in case your opponent like pops it with like a Feel of the Rune or something like that. You have an access to a second one just in case. But yeah, not much to say about the lands there. And then let's go ahead and jump into the side deck real quick, and I'll talk about my matches today. And for side deck, still pretty much the same stuff. 2 Sanctifier, 2 Domin's Veto, 2 Rest in Peace, still pretty good. Triple Aether Gust, I still really like this card. This card has won me a bunch of games against certain matchups that I shouldn't be winning. 2 Kai's Guile for other matchups that I want to graveyard hate or hate creatures. And here's what I have that's a little changed. So I'm trying out just 1 and 1. I had to make room for the next card you'll see here. But yeah, I'm playing 1 Aiming Mind Sensor and 1 Kaya. I still like Kaya. No matter what, I'm still going to keep 1 Kaya in. I don't know about the Aiming Mind Sensor. I'm debating this because the next card kind of takes its place. On top of that, maybe I want to side in a March of the Otherworldly Light. But I don't know. Or maybe I put it back in the Kaya and play that instead of the Arvin Mind Sensor. Because there's times there's a lot of decks that you just can't side the Arvin Mind in against. And I guess you'd rather have a different card in the side. I guess you could play like Emrakul or something like that. Or not, sorry, not Emrakul. What's her face? Oh yeah, it is Emrakul. Yeah. So you can play Emrakul to shuffle your deck back if you're playing against like a mill deck. Or you can play any other one of card that might be good. Maybe Fractal Gust if you're playing against a lot of artifacts. Fractal Gust is a blowout card. I decided just to play the one Mind Sensor still, but I might get rid of it for one of those other cards. I just don't know yet. And this is the final card I put in today. I'm trying out two of them. The reason why I like these, or I'm trying these out, is because it puts a body on the board, so I can back up my threats. Like, my sensor is nice, but he's just a a 2/1. He's still pretty weak. He's the same size as a Snapcaster, and he's still a little bit weaker. So I wanted something a little bit more stronger. Plus, was flashable, that had like a slightly bigger body, that was still hard to interact with sometimes. And yeah, the two subtleties actually worked really well today. And I'll kind of speak about my gameplay today, and yeah, let you know how it went here. So that's the deck. So let's go ahead and talk about my matchups, and showed you what I did, and hopefully the video doesn't get too long. Okay, so yeah, I went to one of my locals today. It was just a six-man tourney, so nothing too big or crazy. Yeah, I played 3 rounds, and I ended up placing, I think, second. I tied for first and second, I guess. It's a little weird, as I'll explain here. So yeah, basically round one, I played against a Jeski blue-white control deck. It's kind of like your standard run-of-the-mill blue-white control deck. Has a little bit of red in there, so that you can play the fire and ice, and you can prismatic ending. So it was kind of more or less a mirror match. So this game was crazy because like he had the upper advantage for most of the game because he was just drawing really well. I was drawing pretty badly. I was not getting my land drops, and so I was just drawing not good stuff. And he was able to resolve a Teferi, and he was able to just kind of uptick this guy forever until I eventually was able to deal with it. But basically, this game took the entire like 40 minutes. Like, it was just game one. We went back and forth for so long. It was just neck to neck. He had 4 solitudes at one point. He had like 3 solitudes on the board, which I had to get rid of. I had like a bunch of like Kaya tokens and Snapcaster, and he got rid of it with Supreme Verdict and stuff like that. So we just kept like trading back and forth. He would resolve a Teferi, I would resolve my Teferi, and we're up ticking, down ticking. So towards like the last 5 minutes of the game, basically I had a Jace on board, and I was trying to fate seal him for victory. But we went into times. Like the last 5 minutes, I was like, Jace was at like 7, 7 loyalty or so, and I had a Teferi, and we were kind of running out of steam because the only thing we had really left in terms of threats was just our man lands that we were trying to like. I had Hall of Storm Giant and Celestial Colonnade. He had just 1 hall left because I got rid of his Celestial Colonnade with a Fatal Push, and so we were just trying to like not really activate and do stuff with the hall, and I was almost decking out too. I had maybe 7 cards left in my deck. He still had a fair amount. Surprisingly, I think I drew a lot of cards during that matchup. I like Archmage Charm myself. I Jaced quite a few times, just to get card advantage. I think maybe I should have started Fate Sealing him a lot earlier, rather than trying to brainstorm with Jace as much. But because like I had like maybe 3 cards to his like 6, plus a couple Planeswalkers, so I was just running behind. He was so ahead just because he resolved his Teferi first, the 5-mana Teferi, and he was just upticking that thing. And I had a hard time keeping up just because I didn't have any way to kind of generate extra card advantage. I was trying to Archmage Charm a few times to draw some. I Snapcaster to draw a little bit. So I was playing from behind in that particular matchup. But yeah, the game took 40 minutes. My last turn, I had Jace at 11 loyalty, so it wasn't enough to ult him. So my last turn on turns, I passed over to him, and I had 10 health. He had maybe 26 or so because he was attacking a lot with the Solitude, so he was up on life. but down on card advantage, down on like a win con, I guess. And so he doesn't really do anything. He casts like a Teferi and then just like ends there. I didn't bother counting the Teferi at this point. Like, there's no point. So my first game took 40 minutes and we ended up in a draw. So that was game one. Game two, I played against Affinity, Blue Infinity. Game one, I think I go first. He mulls to 5, but I didn't really have too much like removal and stuff. But even though he mulled again aggressively, he was able to make that back up with card advantage. He played a lot of that the mine sculptor, or not the mine sculptor, the flying 7 mana artifact card that draws him 2 cards. So he had like 3 of those. He was just drawing a bunch, but and I was at 3 health, and he was Urza Saga with the construct token. He swings in for like 8. He swings in for 1,000,000 damage with the tokens and stuff like that. How I survived was I think I had Solitude, blocking and attacking. I think I had I tried to take control of the tokens. I had a Teferi on board. I uptick, used Prismatic Ending to kind of get rid of his threats. I had also Damned. Damned really helped a lot against him. Damned his board a few times. And then I had Fatal Push. So I was able to kind of stabilize near the end. So near the end of the game, I was at 3 health, but he was at, I don't know, a lot of health. But all he had was lands left on the board. He had like maybe 7 lands to like, and maybe 1 or 2 equipments, but he had no creatures. I kept the board clear of creatures as much as I could. And then I had a 3 mana Teferi and a 5 mana Teferi on board. And from there, he decides that he had enough, and we went to game two. So game two, he goes first. Great, he does his thing. I go second. I do my thing, and we go back and forth for a little bit. I don't know what exactly I sided in against him. I think I sided like Kaya's Guild and maybe Subtlety. But I think that's it. That's all I think I sided in against him. I didn't really have too much else to put in against that particular matchup. Um, so anyways, he does his thing. He tries to set up his board. He wasn't drawing as much this time, but I was drawing. I was a little stuck on land, but I was drawing enough like removal to kind of deal with whatever he put onto the board. He had Urza Saga a few times. And at one point he's even though he had a lot of cards in his hand, none of it was like steam, I guess. So he could never finish me off. And this time I was actually at a pretty healthy amount. I was at 15 health, 16 health, and he wasn't really doing that much damage to me. I was able to resolve Teferis. I resolved big Teferi. Eventually the game goes on. I eventually ulted with the 5 mana Teferi. And then I played another 5 mana Teferi, and then I started down ticking with the 3 mana Teferi. And then I started exiling his lands and stuff like that, and he ends up calling it there. Couldn't really keep up with the amount of like advantage I was generating off of my planeswalkers, and he wasn't able to deal with the planeswalker because I had so much removal. I had like Prismatic Endings, Fatal Push, Kaya's Guild, making tokens, and then on top of that I had Snapcasters and stuff like that to back it up. So since he couldn't establish early damage or early pressure, that was basically game. He did have like living weapons and stuff like that, but like I had Kaya's Guile and Prismatic Ending, and that kind of took care of that. Same with Teferi. I bounced his land a few times. The Urza Saga with Teferi. I bounced the construct tokens a few times with Teferi, and that was basically a game when he couldn't really stabilize his board to like start swinging in. He did cast the mine drawing artifact a few times. I countered it a few times. I even bounced one back just to counter it later, and stuff like that. So it was an interesting game, I guess, because I have played against Affinity, and I have a pretty decent win rate against them. Namely because once I establish a planeswalker, or once I establish board control, they have an extraordinarily hard time coming back. They don't really have any haster. Their best way of getting haste is to make a construct during your end turn, and then try attacking you with it. But I have so much like interaction that Fatal Push and stuff like that. I had Teferi uptick, so I could always prismatic ending during their turn. So I had a lot of open mana plus interaction, and so they just couldn't establish a board well enough to do anything there. So yep, that was the game 2. So I 2-0 the Affinity. Game 3 was probably one of my more interesting matchups. It's definitely a tough matchup for me, as you'll see why here. So he wins the die roll. He goes, he's playing Gruul, and basically he goes turn 1 Forest into Utopia Sprawl. Okay, that's fine. I draw my card. I go like I think I go an island or something like that, and then I opt during his turn, and then his turn 2 he goes Blood Moon, and the rest of my cards in my hand are kind of dead now because I only have one island. I didn't really have any fetches. I had I think Watery Graves, a couple of the filter lands and a check land and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, all right, I'll try to combat it. Like I might be able to get rid of it if I can draw a planes and maybe a prismatic ending. And then he starts to build up his board. He goes two Tireless, or he goes Tireless Tracker. Okay, I try blocking it, but he cracks the clue token to pump his Tireless Tracker to be a I guess a 3/4, or sorry, a 4/3. I couldn't block it with my Snapcaster. Then he plays another Tireless Tracker. So I was like, okay, you take the game. I don't think me sitting here drawing cards for the next 5 minutes is gonna achieve anything. So I gave him the game, and then we went to game 2. Game 2 is what I sided against him. I sided I think mainly these two, these 5 cards, and I think I might have done maybe 1 or 2 Kyles. But the main thing is this is what kind of really helped me here. So game 2, I go first. I get my lands down. I start fetching. I do have a couple fetch lands, so I start cracking for as many basics as I think I need. At least 1 or 2 island and maybe a plains, and that's really the goal there when you're playing against Blood Moon deck, is to at least establish a couple of different basics, and then you should be able to kind of combat Blood Moon from there. So I think during that entire game, he does try to cast Blood Moon 3 times, and each time I had a counter up, so I was okay with just countering it. I resolve Snapcasters, stuff like that. He Furies my Snapcaster. He Furies whatchamacallit, my Teferi a few times. He has Stomping Giants, stuff like that. So he does get a Tireless Tracker out, but I was able to kind of just deal with most of his board while being able to still counter the Blood Moon. So I was set pretty well. And then he drops the freaking 4 mana. I forgot what the monster was called, or the creature. It's the one that's 4 mana. It's green. It has regeneration. Can't be countered. Can't be targeted by opponent's spell. If you remember the card, I'd go ahead and let me know. I always forget the card name, but it's a card that control cannot usually beat, right? So it's a card that you can only maybe beat, especially against blue-white control deck. They can't beat that card. I don't think they can beat that card at all. They could maybe block it or something like that, but for me it was pretty easy. I just kind of guiled it, and he was just like, oh, and he ends up scooping there because I guess he had no other steam or any other way to beat me at that point. Because I think he was tapped out at that point, and then I had 6 mana open, and I let him finish casting the that card, and then I just entwined Kyle's Guile for 6. So I was at a healthy amount of health. I had some creatures on the board, and he was down to 1 or 2 cards with 4 lands. So game 2 goes to me. Game 3 he goes, and basically he starts off, but he starts kind of slow, so he doesn't really get Blood Moon or anything quite yet. My hand was all blue cards. I had Subtlety, I had Aether Gust, I had an island, I had a fetch land, had some another land, I think a swamp, and then I had I think a Teferi. I had a pretty balanced hand. I could play through Blood Moon with that hand, so I keep it. I play my stuff. I think turn 3 he goes Tireless Tracker. I counter it. Uh, Again, turn 4. Um, my turn, I just, since he didn't really have anything on the board, I just hard cast a Teferi, and then I uptick it. Then he goes another Tireless Tracker. I bounce my turn. I come back to me, bounce back the Tireless Tracker. I play another land. And then um, I think he goes. He does something. I think I forget what he does on his turn. But anyways, it goes back to me. And this time I draw. I plus the fairy. I leave my mana up. I put I have 4 mana plus a subtlety in hand. So his turn he goes, and he tries to cast. I think he goes another Tireless Tracker. I don't remember the reason why he didn't play it last time. I think he was trying to develop something. Then I go subtlety. I hit the Tireless Tracker. Okay, he bounces back to his deck. My Teferi's at 2 loyalty right now. Then he goes, he stomps the Teferi, so I lose the Teferi. But I have a subtlety on board, and I have 4 mana. 2 islands, and I think it was a ravine plus like a glacial or something like that. So that was a pretty good. Plus, I still have the Aether Gust in my hand, so like no matter what he did, like the game before that, like the game 2, he like feared me a few times, and I had Aether Gust. I kept turning the fury back to his hand and stuff like that, and it was kind of nasty there. So I love like these cards because green has really no way of interacting with these cards. They can't really Veil Summoners any of this stuff, and they can't like and it's on the stack, so they're like paying for cost of it, and you're forcing them to either top deck that card again, and then like you have another counter spell or something like that, and it was just great. Like anything against green and red, I think subtlety plus the Aether Gust just really did it. So, anyways, goes back to my turn. I have 5 mana now. I attack with the subtlety. I pass turn. I leave my mana open. He goes, and he tries to drop a. He's at 5 mana or something like that. Tries to drop I think a endurance or something like that. Yeah, he tries to drop an endurance. Oh, it's the last turn. It wasn't a Tireless Tracker he dropped. It was an endurance he dropped. He tried to drop an endurance, which I subtletied, and then he stomped me for 2. If I remember correctly, stomps my Teferi for 2. Now this time he drops the Tireless Tracker that he had, and I was like, okay, so I go. Now he's at 6 lands, so he drops a Tireless Tracker. I had another subtlety in the hand, so at this time I subtlety again, and now I have 2 subtleties on board plus 5 mana, and he has 3. He drops a Blood Moon on me. I fetch my land in response, but I'm not too worried with the Blood Moon at this point. I have Aether Gust, and I had like enough colors to remove it, so I just let it resolve. I don't care at this point. So I go my turn. I swing for. He was at 12, so I swing for 6. With the subtlety, so it brings him down to 6. He goes. Now he has like 7 lands or something like that. He cracks two clue tokens that he got off of the Tireless Trackers that he was trying to cast and stuff like that. And yeah, I guess he had no way of dealing with the subtleties anymore, and he gives me the victory. If he had maybe a Fury or something, he might be able to kill one of them, and then or like kill like ping 3, ping 1. And maybe stomp the other one. He might have gotten out of it. But I had counter spells. I had Archmage Charms. I had Aether Gust. So even under Blood Moon, I was just gonna let him try to do something. And worst comes worst, I would Aether Gust the Blood Moon and then respond, and then maybe counter the Fury or counter the Stomping Giants or whatever. It didn't really matter. So he couldn't out this subtlety. So next turn I would have just swing in for 6 and kill him. It didn't matter that Blood Moon was on the board. So yeah, it was great. Like I love playing subtlety and like Solitude as a creature. Like I don't ever really invoke them. I like having these as threats. And then using the rest of my cards in hand to kind of always leave my mana open and just swing in with them. Same idea with Snapcasters. That's the idea. You just kind of leave the Snapcasters, leave the subtleties, leave the Solitude on the board, and just swing in and then just leave your mana open and threaten to counter or threaten to react to whatever your opponent does. So, yep. So I take that game 2-1, and yeah, that brings it to the final conclusion for that tournament. Yeah, and like I said, at the beginning of the video, I ended up placing either second or first, because my opponent game one, he also won his game, so we got the same records. We won 2 games and tied 1 game and have no losses. So I think his record is technically a little bit better than mine with the tiebreakers, but we end up getting the same pricing anyways, so didn't really matter too much. But yeah, um, that's all I really got in terms of the tournament today. But pretty good on. I'd say I was playing pretty well today compared to like some other times. Um, I think I could have done better against the blue white control, because most of the time I do pretty well against blue white control, or just control matches up in general. But this time I was actually kind of struggling. But I think it's my fault for missing some land drops, keeping slightly greedy hand, and just not really drawing anything well, and also incorrectly playing my sequencings, which allowed him to resolve his big Teferi, and which caused me to kind of fall behind on card advantage. So I think that was something I could have played better. Um, I wasn't expecting to play against another control player, because I saw the Kahira and stuff like that. So I thought it was like maybe gonna be 4 color elemental controls or something like that. Yeah, but it turns out to be a blue white control, and I misread that, and that kind of led me to play kind of incorrectly. But I guess I should have just saw that coming, but that was my fault there. So outside of that, I think my other matches went really well. Um, didn't particularly struggle in anything. Didn't really get land screwed too much outside of the first game, even though in the first game I got land screwed in a controlled match. I was able to still keep up, and he couldn't finish me, and I eventually, towards the later third of the game, later quarter of the game, I was able to actually come out on top of the match, and was about to win with like my planeswalker's ability, but time was called, and so we ended up in a tie. But yeah, I think this deck in particular has pretty good ways of dealing with other control decks. Like I don't really have too much trouble with them. What I mean by control decks, I mean like decks similar to like this, like Jeski or blue white. I don't mean control decks like Urian 80 card or um, 4 mental elemental control. Those decks they operate a little bit more differently than just your regular planeswalkers control, your super friends deck kind of. And so my deck does struggle a little bit against more of a creature based control, because they have Cavern of Souls and stuff like that, making it very hard to interact with their creatures. And once their creature establishes themselves on the board, it becomes very difficult to remove them. But against other control decks, I think I do pretty well if they're playing Planeswalker, or they're playing like lots of counter spells and stuff like that. At least in game one, my deck does generally pretty well against them, because I draw mostly pretty good cards against other control matches, namely because of Snapcaster, because other control decks aren't playing Snapcasters. And so they're playing Solitudes, which Solitude doesn't really do anything against me. Like if they're gonna Solitude my Kaya's token, which I actually had happen, people would Solitude my Kaya's token, or they Solitude Snapcaster. That's fine. They want to spend 5 mana to get rid of one card, one measly token, or one Snapcaster. That's fine with me. That's a trade I'm willing to take. They're trading down on mana and card advantage at that point. So that's why my deck generally does pretty good. For me, against them, I don't even bother. I just hardcast it. If it's safe, I'll hardcast the Solitude, and I'll just go to town on them with the Solitude. I'll sometimes save Solitude to play against like like a Hall of a Storm Giant or a Celestial or something like that. But for the most part, my Snapcasters do their job pretty well, and that's how I usually come out on top of other control matchups. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. I'll probably go play either Yu-Gi-Oh or Modern this weekend, since I got a day off this weekend, so I might go ahead and go out and play some more Modern. And yeah, I'll let you guys know. Maybe I'll change the side deck a little bit, but yeah, cards I really MVP it's gonna be subtlety for me today, and perhaps the second Solitude when I did see it. So, yeah, yep, that was pretty good. So let me see if there's anything else I want to talk about. I don't think so. This video has already gone quite long enough. Anyways, I hope you guys stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time.